So if you've been in church or worked in church for any period of time, you are very familiar with the worship that happens at church. And whenever I say that, I mean specifically the musical kind, right? Like we're talking about singing and music and things happening all at once, kind of creating this atmosphere of worship. And usually when people talk about worship in a church, they're referring to that particular thing, which is an element of worship. It's not the only thing we can call worship, right? Of course, it's just one of many things. Anyways, that's what I'm referring to. And so if you've been in that world, you're very familiar with the songs that are just, they kind of go through these stages of popularity, right? Like there's so many songs that are so good and are so beneficial to congregations all across the world. Depending on what perspective you look at that from, that can be really cool and unifying, but at the same time, it makes me want to pull back the curtain just a little bit to see where this is coming from and what's going on with it. Who's writing these things and where are they coming from and how does it align with the church's mission in particular? And I think you can look at it from two different ways. And I don't think they're necessarily opposing views, but I do think that it's just worth considering both. What we call contemporary worship music or worship music right now was born out of that revival season that the church had around the mid-century. You have these very key groups that come out of the Jesus movement, and it just turns into this kind of revolution. Well, all of a sudden, you've got artists who are creating music that is not churchy sounding, but has, Christian lyrics to it, which is incredible. I think that is a very valid way of reaching people with the gospel. As this progresses and grows, we start to see it become a little bit more prevalent. By the time the 80s roll around, you start seeing some groups like, obviously like Petra and the Daniel Band and Mastodon, the old Mastodon, not the current one. And then obviously like Stryper comes on the scene, and they're kind of like this very, very crossover band, people would call them, right? Because they wrote music that sounds like the world and looks like the world and all this kind of stuff. And then they started, not marketing themselves as a Christian band per se, in order to reach more people. And so they got a lot of flack for that. And you can think of that what you will. I'm a big fan of Stryper. And then it moves on into kind of the 90s, into this CCM movement, the Christian contemporary music movement. And so all of a sudden, Christian music starts becoming a little bit more mainstream now. People are listening to it. You got radio stations like K-Love that are coming up and starting to become prevalent. Like you can listen to this on the radio and it doesn't sound any different from what you'd hear on the other stations. Again, I think that's a great thing. I think using cultural, artistic mediums to portray the gospel is a great thing. And then you have the CCM movement ends up evolving into the worship music industry, right? Because CCM in and of itself is an industry, right? There are record labels involved, there's executives involved, there is a lot of layers that again looks very familiar to corporate America, right? A lot of those things look the same. And then the people that fill those roles within those corporations, they're likely doing it because they want to promote the gospel, but of course they're also doing it because they want to feed their families and they want to make a profit. Right? These aren't not-for-profit organizations, right? They're making money. Again, not a bad thing. And in the 2010s, it starts kind of really shifting into this worship music industry. Right now, you have bands that are creating worship music specifically, right? Like these are meant to be played in churches by worship teams. And the sound is, it starts to kind of develop its own signature sound in a way too, which is pretty interesting. And then now you have the market, the audience begins to change, right? Because in the CCM music days, the audience was the families, it was the soccer moms, it was the dads, it was the teens who were listening to it and convincing their parents to buy the CDs. Like, give me the CD, I want to hear this song over and over and over again. That's who they were marketing to. But now in the worship music industry, the audience begins to shift, right? You're no longer marketing to the soccer moms, to the teens. Now you're marketing it to the churches. The customers change from families to churches. And what do I mean by that? Well, with the worship music industry, it's more than just songs, right? It's more than just songwriting, because now you're getting the songs into churches, and then churches have to pay royalties based on the songs that are sang. But then you also get the stems into churches, right? The multi-tracks, the actual sounds of the original recording musicians being piped through the speakers at church to enhance the sound. Again, do I think that's a bad thing? I don't think so. I think that that really can add a level of excellence that can be achieved without having to have real life musicians playing that. So I think it's definitely kind of a push and pull thing. But these stems and these multi-tracks aren't free. Again, they're a subscription model, and now they are really becoming customers of not just the artist, and honestly not the artists at all. They're customers of the corporations behind the artists, right? Because the artists are like you and me. They're people who are creative and have a passion and want to write music and want to spread the gospel and tell people about Jesus. In order for that person's passion to be propagated to the people, there has to be a method, there has to be a venue in which it can travel. And generally the way that happens is through, you have record labels who have the connections, they have the industry connections, they have the ways that they can get that music from the artist to the audience, from the artist to the families, from the artist to the churches. And so those record labels end up becoming the really good beneficiaries of these transactions that happen, right? The artist is putting out these creative works, and the churches are paying for them, and then the person in the middle is making big bucks on that. And so I think it's just worth thinking about and pulling back the curtain on that to see where exactly the state of worship music in our churches is at. I think it could be really easy to ignore it and to just continue playing the songs you love to play because they're good, and they are good, right? They're powerful, and they're helping people, and they're helping people worship. At the same time, I think it's worth asking, well, what is worship? Does the authenticity of worship affect its validity? I think that's worth asking. If we are worshiping through something that we have purchased from a corporation that is chasing after profits, like, is that okay? Are we homogenizing the worship music across of our churches by playing the same songs in the same way over and over and over again, right? Now, instead of having, churches in this part of the country sounding one way and having their unique things, now you have churches over here that sound another way. Now you've got churches all over sounding one way because they're all getting their music from the same source. Again, is it a bad thing? I don't know. I'm just positing the question. Another thing that I do tend to see is a response to this, right? Because I'm not the first person to notice this. Clearly not. I'm getting my information from so many great resources. Check out Leah Payne's God Gave Us Rock and Roll. That's a great resource where she kind of outlines a lot of these things. You have churches that are seeing these types of things, and then something happens that I'm not a big fan of, and that is a pendulum swing in the other direction. It's where people say, hey, this level of production that we're seeing, right? The way that we're making our music so pristine and polished, and we've got lights and we've got fog machines and we've got, it's this really high level of excellence and polish. We got to strip that away because that is no longer genuine. That's no longer authentic. It goes even beyond that to say, well, we like a certain level of ruggedness or scrappiness or rusticness to the way we do things. So a couple thoughts on that. Do I think that it is easy to be focused only on the polish, only on the production, only on making things just so and just right and that kind of thing? Yeah, of course. You can get focused on that. It's very easy to, if you are not focused on the why behind it. Why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? It's easy to start excusing laziness or unpreparedness in the name of being authentic. I think those are two separate things, right? I want to be authentic, absolutely. I think this generation especially is really craving that. At the same time, I want to be authentic with excellence. I want to be genuine while still having great performance, while still sounding good. Like I'm a musician by trade. I want the musicians to be tight and to blend well together. I want the musicians to be skilled. And I love having lights and haze in a room, right? I've been a production director. I love that atmosphere. I love having a great camera crew in a room because I think that it can really get the idea, get the concept, get the feeling of the room across to an online audience that way. I think all of these things can play into it in a way that is authentic, and that really does help elicit an atmosphere of worship in a way that is not solely focused on those elements, solely focused on the polish and the production, right? I think it's a little bit of both. So listen, I think authenticity is not the same thing as being bland, right? Simplicity is not the same thing as sincerity, right? Those two things are separate. And I think that skill is not equal to pride. Like, I want my players to be good at what they do, and I want to know that they're good at what they do, right? To me, that's not pride. That's using the gifts that God has given them to bless Him and to point people towards Him. Like, that's what we do. That's the whole point of what we do on Sunday mornings in your worship teams, on your production teams. That's the whole point. Because listen, God gave them those talents. And what better thing could they do than hone those talents and use them to further His kingdom, right? To give those talents right back to Him without having to worry about what people in the audience are thinking, or having to worry about what somebody's preconceived notions of authenticity are in worship. Because it comes from here. The authenticity, the worship starts right here. It doesn't matter if you have one dude with an acoustic guitar, if you have just vocals, or if you have a full band with everything, the lights and production and everything. It doesn't matter, because it starts here. And I think if you go into it with a good heart, with a heart of intentionality, a heart for worship, a heart for being genuine and speaking to the people, that is true worship, no matter what your stage looks like. So anyways, I just think this is worth thinking about. I'd love to hear what you have to say about these things. Production Professor out.